everyone. It is time for another Presley Mania show. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. If you have not done so and you watch the show and you like my content, please be sure and hit that subscribe button. And also, if you will click on the bell, it will notify you every time I've uploaded a new episode or segment, and you can watch it so you never miss anything. So today we're going to do something and talk about a book that I have wanted to get to for quite some time, but there has been so much going on between the lawsuits with Priscilla and Bridget Cruz and Elvis Presley Enterprises, and just one thing after another, that I haven't been able to get to it. So, but today we are going to be going over this book, Elvis and the Colonel. It was written by Greg McDonald and Marshall Terrell. I've wanted to talk about some things only, and the reason why this book seems so relevant to me is because, number one, the lawsuit between Bridget Cruz, Elvis Presley Enterprises, is also against Greg McDonald's family, his son, and his wife. Greg McDonald has since passed on. I have a bug in my throat. He has since passed on, and so the lawsuit has been filed against his son and his wife, which, as well as Bridget, which is really interesting. Now, I will say that he does mention the sale of 1990, where the Colonel sold off to EPE Elvis's stuff that was at the office in Nashville, and we will get to into all of that here in a little bit. But I think there may be some loopholes. There are some things that don't quite add up to me, and unfortunately he's not here for us to ask, and we just have, the information that is in his book and the hearsay of others who knew him. So we're going to kind of delve into all of that. But first of all, this guy really, really knew Colonel Tom Parker. It's been said that he was adopted by Colonel Tom Parker. That is not true. He was not. However, Tom Parker did take in Greg McDonald when he was a teenager in high school, and he lived with them for quite some time, and finished out his high school years and stayed in close contact with them up until the Colonel passed away. So, he does have a lot of insight into Colonel Tom Parker. I will definitely give him kudos for that. There are so many mixed opinions about Tom Parker. It's kind of like Priscilla Presley. I mean, you either love the man or you don't like the man. There's very few in betweens. Greg falls into he loved him, but he knew him very well, and he was good to Greg, and he took good care of Greg. So he is, of course, going to have a completely different outlook than some of us who never met him, And it really is hard. I've been reading so many different books lately and articles and this and that about Elvis, and I find that you kind of get to the point to where you aren't sure what to believe. Whose story is true? Are they shifting it a little bit to make themselves look good, make Elvis look a little bad? Are they trying to make the Colonel look better so that Elvis will look worse? Or is this how it really was? Unfortunately, all we can do is, the more we read, the more we learn, compare things to each other and come to our own opinions. But I do want to go over this book, and I'll get into some of the things that I didn't like, as well as the things that I did like. So here we go. Elvis and the Colonel. There is a line, and it's on the back of the book, and it says, "The artist always wears the white hat." And that was something that Colonel Tom Parker said and told Greg. The artist always wears the white hat. In other words, Colonel Tom Parker would be looked at and remembered as a villain. And when you look at the Elvis movie, that's exactly kind of how they portrayed him. The one with Austin Butler, the one Baz Luhrmann did, they portrayed Colonel Tom Parker pretty much as a villain. You know, some people say there would have never been an Elvis Presley had there not been a Colonel Tom Parker. I don't know about that. I tend to disagree with that statement. Do I feel like that Tom Parker was incredibly good for Elvis at the beginning and he knew how to promote? Not a doubt in my mind. My question comes in towards probably the 60s and on in Elvis's career, as to how I really feel the Colonel was. You know, like, do I think that he was truly, truly good for him at that point? I've got real mixed emotions. I lean more towards no, I don't think he was, but you know, then I know people who actually knew the Colonel. I have a friend who actually knew the Colonel and worked for him, and he says that he always had Elvis's best interest at heart, and so does Greg McDonald. So let's get into it. Let's go back to that line that the artist always wears the white hat. That statement sets the tone for the book in how we view Tom Parker, not how we view Elvis, how he viewed Elvis, not how we do, how he viewed Elvis. It made no matter what, it seemed to me like Greg was trying to say, regardless of what Elvis did, whatever, the Colonel would take the fall for it. I don't think I totally agree with that statement, but it does set the tone for the book. He portrays Tom Parker as an incredibly smart man, hardworking, very good at what he did, very almost genius level. And I agree with that. I think he was. The man most definitely knew how to promote, and some of the things he came up with where Elvis was concerned is just mind-blowing. You know, he didn't make just I love Elvis buttons. He made I hate Elvis buttons too. And why did he do that? Well, because they would sell. It was money. That's what he was about. His bottom line concern was always how to make a buck. And Elvis, he saw dollar signs with Elvis. And look at him. I mean, look what happened. I mean, Elvis took off like crazy, and with the Colonel's management at the very beginning, I mean, they were an unstoppable team. You know, but there are people who, like I said, will defend Colonel with their dying breath, and Priscilla is one of them. You know, there are others that were in the circle that truly loved him as well, and they see him completely different than a lot of us do. The book gives a lot of information on the Colonel when he was younger, where he came from. His given name was Andreas Cornelius Van Cook. I can't even, it's hard to say that word. So, but how he ended up becoming Tom Parker is very interesting. So he was born in Breda, Holland. He ended up, right before his dad passed away, going to Rotterdam, and he went there with his dad's blessing. And he ended up working and doing some odd jobs and stuff there. And then he stowed away in the bowels of a ship that was bound for Hoboken, New Jersey. That's how he got to America the first time. He ended up leaving and going back to Holland to check on his family, but he came back to America. While he was here, you got to keep in mind, he was very, very young. Just a young teenage boy, like 17 probably. And he just did odd jobs, whatever it took to survive. He also was much like a hobo in that he would just hop the rail cars, ride the train from one place to the other. But he was very insistent that he be clean. That was the one thing that stood out to me in that book, is that he always had a sliver of soap, some kind of soap with him, because as soon as he would, reach a place, he would find a place to get cleaned up and, not be nasty and gross. And I thought that was kind of interesting. When he came here, he knew nothing of the English language, so he had to learn it. And he talks about also in chapter 2 of the book, there have been rumors about the colonel murdering a woman in Holland. And some people have said that's exactly why he left. That case has never been solved. Greg does not seem to think that's it at all. That he said he couldn't see it, because he said any man who loved animals the way he did and could not stand to see an animal get hurt would never murder someone else. I don't know that. I didn't know the man, so it's hard for me to make a judgment. All I can say is I hope and pray that he did not do that. It would be nice to think that he didn't. We don't know. That's something that's just left out there. And anyhow, how he ended up becoming Tom Parker is that he started working for a company. Well, not a company. They were owned by this family. They were called Parker Pony Rides. So they had these ponies, and Colonel Tom, or Andreas at the time, was working for them. They took him in. He lived with them. They became very attached to this teenage boy. So this was in Georgia. So they ended up adopting him, legally adopting him. And he changed his name to Thomas Andrew Parker. So that's how he became Tom Parker. But I find it interesting because, I've always heard that he never got his U.S. citizenship. Well, Greg says here in the book that he joined the United States Army on June 20th of 1929, 6 days before his 20th birthday, and did so under his American name, Thomas A. Parker. However, he acknowledged his Dutch birth and told military authorities he had immigrated to the U.S. 4 years prior, a fact that is inconvenient to some in the Elvis world who want to sling mud at Colonel Parker for hiding his true identity. Well, I always felt like he tried to cover it up, that he didn't tell people really where he was from. But apparently, to Greg, he was quite open and honest and talked about his time over there, about his family, his mom. So Greg learned a lot about him. So, I also, if memory serves me, I thought that in the court case, they weren't able to, in one of the court cases, they weren't able to hold him down, and because he didn't have citizenship here. So they weren't able to try him, and that's how he got out of some things. So, what's true, what's not, it's anybody's guess. Let's just leave it at that. I found that the book had quite a few inaccuracies, and I wanted to go over some of those. I feel like that if you are going to write a book, and I'm not trying to speak ill of Greg McDonald, I'm just giving my honest opinion of what I thought about his book. If you read it and you knew nothing about Elvis Presley and the Colonel, you probably just take it all for face value. But if you have any kind of Elvis knowledge, and you have facts stored away in your brain, or you read something and you're like, that doesn't really ring true, and you go and you look it up, you're like, oh. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot of the things that he said, I found to not be 100% factual. And he says that the Colonel co-signed on the Audubon Drive house. Now, I have gone and I've looked up a property deed search. I cannot see the Colonel's name on anything. But did he? How would we know for sure? But he confuses the dates with when the Colonel did this. Greg says that Elvis bought the Audubon Drive house in 1957. That's not true. Elvis bought the Audubon Drive house on March 12th of 1956. And I went to the Graceland website, and maybe it was just a misprint in the book. Maybe it was something that didn't get edited. But when I went to the Graceland website and looked up what they had to say about the Audubon Drive house, I found that it was almost verbatim as to what Greg had said, with the exception of the fact that the Colonel co-signed on it. There was not one single sentence, anything that alluded to that. He got a couple of things wrong about one of his movies. He said that Elvis played twins in the Double Trouble movie. No, that was Kissing Cousins. He talked about Elvis's concussion, and I think that what really gets me about some of that, which I'm unclear of, is if he is just going off of the Colonel's, what he was told by the Colonel. Sorry, y'all, I have got just a little bit of a tickle in my throat today. If he's going off what he was told by the Colonel, or because Greg met the Colonel, or met Elvis and the Colonel in 1965, okay? And some of these incidences that he talks about would have been before his time with him, or when he had only been around for about a year and wasn't as involved with the Colonel as he came to be later. So when he talks about the concussion story, when Elvis fell and hit his head, they said he tripped on a phone cord and hit his head on the bathroom tub right before he was supposed to go in and start filming Clam Bake. He says that Priscilla found him. Well, Priscilla says that in her book as well. But then you have other accounts that say Priscilla wasn't there. So again, there is another, what do we believe? We don't know. And then he talks about that he was in the car with the Colonel when he saw Elvis on a motorcycle with Natalie Wood on the back of it with him. And that the Colonel looked at him and said, the boy's doing all right, But he dated Natalie Wood in 1956. I mean, could they have possibly ridden a motorcycle together later? Maybe, but after what Natalie Wood had to say about him, I I don't think that happened. I think maybe that was somebody else, or it was just something he remembered incorrectly. Um, he also talks about Priscilla, and I can tell that he was a fan of hers. He said that page 248 talks about the divorce, and I've got to read this to y'all because I don't agree with this. And imagine that. Okay, it says, the world was changing, and so was Elvis. Elvis and Priscilla were separated, and talk of a divorce was making headlines everywhere. He had been living under the age old male belief that the husband could play around, but the wife was to stay home and remain faithful and raise their child. Despite Elvis's infidelities, Priscilla had remained faithful for years. She had finally had enough of Elvis and told Elvis she was leaving him. Well, that's not true. We know that is not true. Priscilla's even said herself that she was not faithful, and we know who she left Elvis for and had been seeing him for quite some time, and we have accounts of what Lisa had to say about Priscilla and Mike Stone as well. So maybe where these opinions came from, I'm not sure. Because I feel like Greg knew the Colonel maybe way better than he knew Elvis. That's just my opinion. Or the Elvis he knew wasn't, maybe he just heard different stories, like he believes Priscilla's account, or he believes what he was told about her. I'm not sure. I did not like how he painted Colonel as, which is different than what he says. The Colonel says that the artist always wears the white hat. Well, I feel like that Greg's book was trying to paint the Colonel as the one who wore the white hat, and that really, in the end, he was the one who was protecting Elvis and took care of Elvis. That's just my take on the book. Because the way they portrayed Elvis in the 70s with the drugs and stuff, his spending sprees, all of these things, he really goes off on Elvis's spending sprees. And he talks a lot about how Vernon was very upset, and he would call the Colonel talking about how much money Elvis had spent, that Elvis could not, he was having to tour to be able to afford his lifestyle because he was spending more than he brought in. Maybe he was, but I didn't like how it was portrayed in the book, how they made Elvis look. It was his money. He could do what he wanted to with it. But as we have talked about on many occasions, Elvis was taking care of a lot of people. He also, and then when you start talking about the money, you get into the 50-50 split, that the Colonel was taking 50% of Elvis's earnings and Elvis got the other 50%. Well, Greg was very much defending the Colonel Tom Parker, saying that, it wasn't the way it appeared. But I don't know how you justify a 50-50 split when the artist, to me, should be getting a whole lot more than that, and that is not standard in the music industry by any means. So he talked about another inconsistency was that, and will somebody please tell me, because I have never seen this. He said that Elvis spent a lot of money having the Lisa Marie refurbished, the airplane. We know that. We know he did. But he said it had a fake fireplace in it. If any of you have seen a fake fireplace in the Lisa Marie, would you please let me know? Because I have gone through and toured that thing many times. I've never seen a fake fireplace. in the Lisa Marie. Um, Maybe I missed it, but he said there was. He also said that Elvis had stairs installed in 1977 on the Lisa Marie that would, from fold out so he could come off the plane because it didn't have stairs, and that he paid $700,000 for them, which was 3 times more than the cost of the airplane. I don't think the Lisa Marie had stairs installed. Now, I could be wrong, but just based off the pictures and things I've seen, even in 77 when he's getting off the plane with Ginger, it always looks like to me that wherever he landed, they brought over stairs for them to exit the plane and come down. So, that's an observation. He went on to say that the Colonel had no gambling debts, that he had talked to Loanne Parker, Colonel's wife, about it, and that she had said he had no outstanding debts, that he basically took care of all of his gambling debts and things that he had, which goes against other things that we've heard and things we've been told. So what are we going to believe? It's really hard when you start getting so many different stories, and that's something I've wanted to touch on with you guys, is that there have been so many books written about Elvis. There have been so many documentaries and movies and spoofs and this and that, that how do we go about telling what is true and what is fiction? I think we have to just compare all of it, and like I said earlier, come to your own opinions, base it on what we know of Elvis, what we know to be true of Elvis, and then come to our own conclusions. My honest opinion is, I think that the book is entertaining. If you don't know anything about Elvis Presley, but the more you know, I think the more you realize some of the things in here aren't necessarily 100% accurate. Does it mean everything in here is off? No, I'm sure it's not. But it's just my opinion of the book. And I have lots of them when it comes to things that have been written about Elvis. I did find one thing very, very interesting. And right before I came on the show, I was sitting looking up some things, and this is how I spent my lunch. I took a break, go to Chick-fil-A, I get a salad, and I'm sitting in the car with my book and my notepad and my pen in hand, eating my salad, going through, looking at notes, going. And that's how Rhonda spent her lunch, was reading over things in this book. And I came across this. And you know how Priscilla said that she was charged with going to the Chino Canyon house. Actually, Mike Edwards also said in his book that they went to the Chino Canyon house. They went through it. Priscilla was going things that she wanted. And, there was that creepy part in there about how Mike Edwards walked into Elvis's shower and there was a dried wash rag. And, that got kind of weird to me. We're not going to go there. But anyhow, this book, Greg says in a footnote on page 328 that after Elvis's death, this is verbatim per Greg, after Elvis's death, Vernon Presley hired me to handle the sale of the Chino Canyon home, arrange for some vehicles to be transported to Memphis, and finish some construction odds and ends on the house. He also gave me all of the storage boxes and other Elvis stuff that had been left in the back of the garage. Okay, why did that stand out to me? Because if Vernon gave him that stuff, what was in those boxes? Could that be some of the stuff that's being auctioned, that he had to auction off, that were actually Elvis's stuff? I don't know. I have no idea, but it just struck me as an odd thing to say. Y'all, this is just a brief synopsis of little things in the book. I could go more in depth, and we may. If y'all found this interesting at all, please let me know. If you don't, then we'll move on to another topic. But I just think that it's relevant with what is going on with the McDonald family, Bridget Cruz, GWS Auctions, Elvis Presley Enterprises, and all of the things that they're saying, that they have items that were part of the 1990 sale that the Colonel gave to Elvis Presley Enterprises, that it was all of this stuff was supposed to be included. I also found, and I know I've gone longer than normal. When I read about the 1990 sale of information, okay, let me read this here. If I can find it. It was important to me that y'all, here it is, the 1990 deal. I went and I pulled, because Greg talks about the 1990 deal here in the book. He says that the Colonel sold all of this to Graceland for $2 million. Okay? Well, according to the letter that they use in the lawsuit as Exhibit A, that's not true. It was $1,250,000 is what the Colonel sold this stuff for. Okay, and let's flip over, because this is what I found really interesting and wondering if this is the loophole. Okay, it says, let me see, let me find it. I'm sorry, guys. Basically, what it's saying is that the things that are included in the sale are items that were found at the Madison, Tennessee office, and items that the Colonel, okay, here it is. It says, the intent and desire of the parties is to convey the, in quotes, entire collection. The entire collection means all Elvis Presley memorabilia, Elvis-related memorabilia, Colonel Parker's Wonderful World of Show Business memorabilia, and those matters related to Colonel Parker's entertainment history. Here's the kicker: located at the Madison House in Tennessee, and those items graciously designated by Colonel Parker to be included from his house in Las Vegas, Nevada. So what that says to me is that the things that were part of this sale were the things that were located at the Madison House, which was his office in Tennessee. He lived there too for a while. And what he designated from his Las Vegas home. That's how I take it. Now, the stuff that Greg has, he says wasn't part of that deal. Which is it? I don't know, but I'm just wondering if that could be a loophole. Some of the things, there is a list of items that GWS was going to auction off, which has been put on hold. And They have provided a list of 74 items, and I have gone through it, and there are many things. There is a telegram from in 1961 from Tom Parker to Vernon. And you remember one of the things that is really, really in question with this is the letters that were written from Vernon to Tom Parker, and from Tom Parker, I guess, back to Vernon Presley. Apparently, those letters, they say, are very damaging. Damaging to who? I don't know. If it's Elvis, are they damaging to Vernon? But I think that's why Graceland wants them back, and they don't want them to get out. But without going through every single thing line by line, clicking on it, and trying to pull it up, I'm not seeing anything but that one item. And I could have missed something, but I don't think that's it, because apparently there are 200 letters, and I think the one that was written in 1961, I doubt very seriously that's part of it. So I guess we will have to wait and see. I do not have copies of that California lawsuit case. I wish I did, and we could go over it line by line, and we might be able to make a lot more sense of it. But like I said, I wanted to do this little synopsis on the Greg McDonald book, tell you what I thought about it. I'm not trying to speak ill of him or anything, or his memories. Like I said, it just seems different to me than other accounts that I've heard. And based on some of the things that we know for sure, I think some of the information is incorrect. So that just kind of throws a doubt on other stuff, in my opinion. So until next time, remember, you only get one shot at this life, so live each day to the fullest, because you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. Hope to see you all next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.